All right, welcome everyone to the first, the first Mage tutorial that I believe has been done on YouTube. Um, this is going to be a super informative, assume you know nothing about magic and crawl video guide from start to finish, basically, of one of the easier combos for doing a mage in general. So I've got a set of notes here that I'll just crumple the paper here to show you that I've actually written it, though it's very hard to do that. Let me see if I can get a nice little paper shuffling here. So I've got some notes that I'll be looking at and referring to throughout the course of the video. But I will also be writing down some notes in this Google Doc that I will probably be leaving in the in the description. So if you do want to check out the stuff in the video without really having to watch it, though I do suggest you do watch it because I will be very, very in depth about this. You can kind of use these videos as like a catch-up guide. Like I said, I would suggest that you try to watch them at least these tutorial videos at least once before you use these documents, because they won't be as I guess covered. They'll just be whatever I decide to jot down in the course of the video. Alright, so let's get started. Let's talk about magic in general for Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup. So DCSS is a game that allows players that aren't worshipping the god Trog to cast magical spells based on a couple of things. So there's a couple of mechanics that we want to learn about magic. So you might have already seen some of them if you've done any experimenting. Spell success rate is one of the more like obvious ones. So it has each spell has a percentage chance to fail. If you train spell schools, the relevant spell schools, or you train spell casting, or you have higher intelligence or lower armor, or don't have a shield, that spell failure will go down. But generally for a mage, you want to get those spell failures down to about 1% on most of your spells. Spells can be used in a variety of ways. There's a lot of spell schools. I'm just going to go ahead and go here. I'm going to just look on the right-hand column. Spellcasting, Conjurations, Hexes, Charms, Summonings, Necromancy, Translocations, Transmutations, Fire, Ice, Air, Earth, and Poison. So the bottom 5, Fire, Ice, Air, Earth, and Poison, tend to be the more aggressive spell schools when combined with Conjurations. Conjurations is like your generic attack spell school. And then, obviously each of the 5 at the bottom will be your elemental schools. So a spell, for example, such as Fireball could be Conjurations and Fire. So training Conjurations and Fire will decrease the spell failure. On top of that, training spell schools and increasing your intelligence will also give you will also increase your spell power. Spell power is how strong your spell is. So when you start off, you won't be very strong and your spells will kind of suck, but the spell power allows your character to scale later into the game. Generally speaking, though, it's sort of like Mendeley. Once you get past the certain point, you really don't need to worry about spell power. Usually it's one of those mechanics where you don't really have to worry about it at all. Okay, so on top of that, there is also spell hunger. So every single spell that you cast will cost a certain amount of food from your satiation bar, which you can see when you eat food. So the higher level the spell, or the lower intelligence you have, generally the more hungry you will get. This is actually kind of a problem for spellcasters. If they are using really high hungering food for like the majority of the game, they'll end up starving or getting pretty close to starvation. So it's kind of a balancing act between casting your spells and managing hunger. People do say that usually doesn't matter, and mostly really doesn't ever matter, because chunks are a thing. But occasionally you can get a little screwed over if you go too hard. For example, casting a level 6 spell as soon as you can, causing it to be max hunger. So every time you cast it, it drains like a huge amount of food from your resource bar every single time you cast it, and just spamming it as your only spell. That's going to suck. So yeah, that's mostly the basics of magic. Depending on what kind of school you pick or what kind of magic you invest in, the the nature of your spells are different, so I can't really explain to you how everything works. But for the time being, just know that the magic spellcaster, the broad generic archetype spellcaster, is mostly a conjurer. Conjurations tends to be the only real way that you can play a like attack focused mage, because everything else doesn't do direct damage. The other alternative mages could be summoning, and that's about it really. So in terms of pure mage, I mean, obviously the translocations, transmutations, and hexes all have different like archetypes, stabbers, transmuters, and just scalds in general, or what they're called, hybrids, I guess. But the one we'll be focusing on today will focus primarily on conjurations, and you'll see soon, fire magic. So let's talk about the races that are pretty good with mage. So you can check what the aptitudes are for every spell school by going question mark, exclamation mark, question mark, percentage mark, and that'll show you, all the spell stuff here. So as you can see, the best ones to pick as a spellcaster could probably be Deep Elf. Null looks like it's better, but it has a class restriction, so I wouldn't. It's a bit complicated for your first mage. I'd rather just pick something like a Deep Elf. Good alternatives to that would be possibly. Usually people would pick Draconian. Draconian is over here. -1 is fine, by the way, for aptitude. 0 is fine as well, perfectly acceptable. But here you can see Deep Elf has positives in everything but air magic, and a very high positive in charms, and an extremely high positive in spellcasting, relative to the rest of the cast. That makes it very attractive as a mage character. Obviously, of course, the Deep Elf suffers from having a lot less health than everyone else, and Draconians don't, which is why their Draconian is often taken as an alternative. You can also pick Human, but that's very generic, and you don't really benefit at all from it. So I really wouldn't bother too much. Naga, again, like, that's fine, but you're struggling with the class as well, which is not really good for your first mage run. So I need to check the volume just to make sure that I'm not going overboard. Last video that I made, I actually managed to screw up, and the audio was really bad. Alternative mages, ogres are fine. They're at -1 to all, and then +1 to spellcasting, and they have a lot more health as well. Obviously a little bit worse than Draconian for AC due to the race nature, and also a bit in aptitudes, but it's fine. You make up for it with +40% or 30% HP or whatever the hell it is. Gargoyles are okay casters, but usually are designed to be like more earth elementally. That's about it really. Like, there's not demigods you can play, but I wouldn't do that for your first one. It's just too hard to play without a god. Usually the gods are very important for consistency in the late game. Tengu is it looks good on paper, +3 to conjurations, +2 to summoning and all that stuff, and +3 to air, but the reality is Tengu is just far too squishy without the power in the spellcasting and intelligence of the Deep Elf. So I would suggest not picking a Tengu as your first caster. You'll end up hating Tengu, which is what everyone really does. Tengu's just garbage. But anyway, beside that, so that's the races. Then I'm going to go through the mages. So there's a bunch of mage schools. These are called book starts. Weirdly enough, these warrior mages also are book starts, but I wouldn't consider them pure book starts, which is why they're not really called book starts. You start with a book on all these hybridy ones, but they're not mages. These are the mages. So this is the wizard. It starts with a variety of like survivability spells. It's kind of low in damage, but it's not bad. Conjurer. Conjurer is a just pure like damage class, but it used to be a much better school prior to, I believe, 0.20, but it was nerfed recently, so they removed one of the good spells in it, which is Iskenderun's Battlesphere, it's called, which makes the book considerably worse, which is why I'm actually doing this video in the first place. My original mage tutorial, like in quotation marks, was a Conjurer, but Conjurer was nerfed, so I need to update that, because Conjurer is now, I believe, significantly worse than the alternatives, I think. I actually believe Conjurer is one of the more bad mages now, just because of that spell being removed and being replaced with a just ridiculously bad spell in Force Lance, which is garbage. Anyway, Summoner is, again, a Summoner, so it's a bit different from Mage. I might do a Summoner tutorial later on, but Today's not that day. Necromancer is not really a book start either. I believe Necromancer should actually go into Warrior Mage, just because it's really not that much of all the book spells that you get from it aren't very good. They're not exactly good for dealing with the dungeon. So I feel like Necromancer should actually go over here. It's kind of weird, actually. Fire Elementalist is the choice pick that we're going to have today. The reason why is because, like Conjurer, it offers very strong direct damage and is very straightforward to play. And the only issues that it has is in range. A lot of the spells that it has kind of lacks a little bit of range in the early game, but it's actually very strong regardless. And later on you get access to Fireball, which completely annihilates the range issue. Ice Elementalist, again, more of a Warrior Mage spell book, is very good. I would say it's probably the second best after after Fire Elementalist. Offers you some really great spells and also offers you transitions into summoning and hybridism, so it's really versatile, really powerful. Air Elementalist is a little bit iffy. It requires a lot of different tools to use, and it's kind of tricky to use in general. And the late game, in terms of the book, like the starting book that you get, the later spells are just fairly whatever. I think this is a really bad time to bring it up, but yeah, a book start gives you about I think it gives you about 6 predetermined spells. So each book has a different starting like slot thing. So I'm just talking about all the spells that are given to you. Earth Elementalist is fine. It's a very low range. It's a fairly low range book. A lot of the attacks that it does are like kind of situational and mana inefficient, but it's a very strong school because none of its spells can actually be resisted by elemental resistance. Venom Mage has been buffed recently with Poison Vapors, a level 2 spell, Smite Poison. It's quite good. People say it's bad because it can't deal with undead and R-poise enemies, but against most enemies it's actually very effective, and with any race that has a fairly good ability to kill an enemy with melee or something, it's actually extremely powerful. So I feel like Venom Mage is an underrated class, but it's not amazing because of the fact that it can't deal with those R-poise enemies. It's still very good though. I wouldn't count it out of the Mage class at all. Anyway, so today we're going to pick Fire Elementalist because this is because that's what I said. And we're also going to go Deep Elf. Now, I would normally go... you could also go Draconian, like I said, if you are feeling that Deep Elf is a little bit weak. But I wanted to pick Deep Elf for a couple of reasons. First of all, the magic makes it... It's really far into the magic area, so it lets you just push right into the deep end of magic. Whereas with Draconian, you're kind of playing a hybridier style because of that extra HP, that extra weapon spell stuff, the extra breath weapon, and just generally the tankiness of the class. You'll be able to go a bit more in melee. It's a bit more forgiving, which is good. However, for me, Deep Elf was the first mage that I played, and in general, I find that it's a very powerful tool for teaching, because it can get your spells really quickly, and it can also teach you to not play like a melee character. But again, if you're going for that like transition from melee to magic, it's perfectly acceptable for you to pick Deep Elf as well. Alright, thank God. So we've started point number 1 of our notes. Thank goodness. Alright, I'm going to just mentally tick that one off. Alright, now we're going to talk about our in-game stuff. So once we're in the game, we'll note a couple of things. First of all, my intelligence is 19, which is a ridiculously high number. That's a benefit of the Deep Elf class. It really just bolsters your mana, your intelligence like crazy. I also have 6 mana, which is quite high for a beginner, again, because of the Deep Elf. We'll look at our aptitudes here from an individual perspective, and look, as you can see, we're basically the Minotaur of magic. We offer a wide variety of positive aptitudes across the board for magic, insanely high amounts of spellcasting. +3 in spellcasting is almost unheard of. I think it might actually only be Deep Elf that has +3 spellcasting, other than Null, but like I said, Null doesn't count. On the left side, though, is a fairly dismal state. -2 in fighting, +2 in dodging is the only really saving grace. -2 armor, -2 shields. So this is a character that really needs to be played cautiously and carefully. The best way to defend yourself against these attacks is kill everyone before they see you. And that's really the best way to do it. So we're going to be talking about that strategy in a couple of seconds. But first of all, let's talk about skilling. So Actually, no. Let's talk about our spells first. Flame Tongue is, as I said before, your beginner spell, your level 1 spell. All book starts have a level 1 offensive spell. Flame Tongue is a very short range, so you can see there the range is only 2. Very short range, but as you grow stronger, it gets a little bit more long. Fire spell. It's just generic throw a Flame Tongue at someone. It's the equivalent. It's the D&D equivalent of Burning Hands, basically. Flame Tongue costs 1 mana, and the reason why is because it's level 1. So, tip number 1, I guess. Tip number 1, spell level equals mana. So, like I said, I don't know how this is gonna show up. If you guys would like to add to this, please let me know. Just like pre-write some of the stuff in, put it in the comments, and I'll just add it in. I obviously don't want to let everyone edit because I don't want someone just like destroying the whole thing. Like, I know no one would do that because the crawl community is fairly mature about it, but you know, just in case someone makes a mistake and goes, boop, oops, I accidentally deleted it. Oh, panic, it's over. I don't want that to happen. So I'm just gonna, you know, hold a tighter leash on it. Anyway, we'll talk about these later spells later on, but we'll note a couple of things. I have 5 spell levels. A spell level is the same as with D&D. You can learn spells up to the amount of spell levels that you have. So if I learned, for example, Fireball right now, I'd have 0 spell levels left. However, you cannot learn spells until a certain point. I think it's when your XL reaches their level of that spell. I'm not sure though. It could also follow a D&D thing. I have no idea. But just generally, the game will progress with you knowing these kind of things. Like, you will know when you need to get them because you just check every level if you can memorize something. But yeah, generally speaking, as you can see, Hunger is 0 on the spell. Power is pretty low, but it's fine. It's the first turn. Noise is almost silent. Noise is really a mechanic that you worry about only on a few spells, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. Sorry, again, frantically checking the audio to make sure I'm not blowing out the mic, because I did that last video and that was very sad. Okay, so again, we're still not playing yet because there's so much stuff that needs to be said. It's been 17 minutes already. It's ridiculous. Okay, so with a mage, your strategy is don't get hit. That's literally the best strategy you got. Don't get hit. How do you do this? Well, there's a couple of ways of doing it. Never let anything get in melee with you. That's the easiest way to do it. Kill everything before they get in melee with you, or run away before they touch you in melee. We're made of paper right now, so the best way to avoid damage is just kill everything, and don't have melee encounters. The second tip that I would say, tip number 2, don't get in melee with stuff. Now, this rule doesn't apply in the first dungeon floor. It applies wherever possible. Obviously, if things do get in melee with you, you can still kind of fight if you need to. But this is up to discretion, and generally the more safe mage players, and therefore the more successful mage players, will avoid doing any combative action while in melee. You'll generally try to run away or use a consumable or something to get out of things with melee. Again, depending on the strength of the enemy and all that stuff. But we will discuss that, and we will see that in a lot of actions later on in the game. The third tip, I would say, is manage your mana. Oh, God. Oh, this is so embarrassing. I'm sorry. No, God. Please, stop. Health equals mana. Alright, so this one says, tip number 3 that I'm giving is manage the mana, your health is your mana. So a melee character, generally speaking, will have a full, will run away when their health gets to half mana. A mage, on the other hand, health is, for a mage, the health is completely irrelevant. It's an arbitrary timer that tells you, okay, the game is over, you can't play anymore. Mana is the true lifeblood of the mage. If you are playing a mage and you are at 0 mana, you are effectively dead. You have 0 health, or you have 1 hit point. Just think of it like that. Maybe you have 1 hit point and like 1, I don't know, divine intervention. That's all you got. Because of this, you should always treat your magic as if it were your health. So if I am casting spells and I'm at 2 mana left out of like 30, I need to bail. It doesn't matter what else is on the screen. Most of the time, I need to bail. Unless I can somehow finish off that last thing and I'm completely safe. Otherwise, I'd be bailing right now. So that's a really important tip. We'll go into that in a little bit now. Now we'll talk about skilling. God, this is still... We're still on tip number 2. I mean, we're still on like point number 2. This is ridiculous. Oh, actually, we're on point number 3 now. Sweet. Okay, cool. So skilling. Generally, like I said, we want to get our spell failures on our future spells down. As you can see, these are all Conjurations Fire, which makes our skilling quite easy in the early game. Spellcasting, Conjurations, Fire Magic. And I like to put a focus on Conjurations because of one main reason. Fire Magic is great and all, but Conjurations tends to be the branching spell school. It tends to be the common spell school among all attack spells. So trading more Conjurations will mean that if I need to pick up a spell that isn't a fire spell, I'll be better off. Note that I won't train fighting and I won't train dodging this early in the game. Unlike every single melee in the game, basically. The reason why this is the case, I'm not training defense, is because right now I need to get my magic up. And my best defense right now is strong magic. So, again, fighting will give me way too little return, dodging gives me way too little return. I need to get my magic up now, then I can get it later on. That does not mean that you do not train fighting, okay? You still train fighting. In fact, in almost all of my mages, fighting is my most trained skill. But in the beginning of the game, it's not. You can also opt to train a little bit of stealth, especially deep elf. +3 stealth is great, but I'm not going to do that because I don't need to. My best defense is good offense. Alright, so let's go. Before we start going too much, I want to note quickly that if you cast fire spells over shallow water, you will generate steam, which is a damaging cloud that can also damage you, but it does significant damage to enemies here. So, okay. Our first encounter is a bit unlucky. A cockroach is a fast enemy, so it's faster than us. And unfortunately, we have no real exit. I think it can also fly, so it's completely... Oh, it's not. Alright. So we need to avoid being in melee with this with some form of escape. I think the best way here would be actually going down right, down right, and then casting Flame Tongue here. Now notice that there's a cloud of steam here. I could actually die in one turn, I believe, if I cast Flame Tongue here. So I need to walk out of the steam cloud immediately. I'm generating steam clouds because I'm hoping that the cockroach walks in and dies, as it just did. So I was able to kill that cockroach by using that interaction immediately. It's not a very common interaction, and generally speaking, it's not even a really good one later in the game. It's completely irrelevant. But for now, it's really good if you can abuse it and not die. There are stones here. I'm going to pick that up. That's going to increase our effective range. So this is a bit of a tool that I picked up from League of Legends. Sorry, I play League. I think of it as effective zones of power. So right now I have Flame Tongue and it's exactly this long. This is my effective range, right? I can only kill enemies within this range with my magic if they step inside. Right now this hobgoblin is out of that range. I have now, because I've picked up these stones, full screen range, a very weak zone of offense at a full screen range. So the stones were picked up to give me that extra range. But at the same time, it still sucks. So it's not worth my time to throw this hobgoblin, the stone at the hobgoblin, if it's not going to kill it, if I can't guarantee that it kills it by the time it gets in melee with me. Again, melee, we treat it like almost death. So I think, again, I'm going to back off and go towards this area again, rather than throwing the stone. And hopefully, he's going to walk near the water. I don't think he is this time. Let's just cast one Flame Tongue, see if it works. Alright. We may be in a bit of trouble here. Cast another Flame Tongue. So again, look, we have very little health, very little mana. I couldn't escape up to the north because that would be more unknown, and that's just not a good strategy. I think what we'll have to do is stand like this. Possibly cast the fire like that. Nope, didn't work. Alright, we're just gonna have to Flame Tongue this guy. So again, melee is complete anathema to this character. Look at how quickly I almost died. I was only very lucky to avoid that extra strike that would have killed me. So it's really not a great starting example for you guys, because I was already completely fucked at the time. But here again, I can throw the stone. So I know from past experience that it's probably not a good idea to lure him all the way back here. Mostly because he's not stupid enough to step in the water. So instead I'll just throw rocks at him and then Flame Tongue him when he gets in range. Managing your range and your effective range is really important in this game. It's very important that you stay nimble. Also, I have some macros. Sorry about this. I need to quickly clear this. Clear. Nope. There we go. Alright. Sorry about that. That was just macros from my other game. Okay, so we're going to explore again. Now, if you're feeling uncomfortable, you can use shift move or just move in general to explore slowly. I don't really care that much, so I'm just using shift move. I could also use O, but again, for the first couple of floors, I want to show a little bit of the more optimal play, I suppose, for a mage. So here's a bat. Again, you can't really do much with a bat in melee with you, so just don't stress. Like, I don't mean literally control Q every time you get in melee. I'm just saying treat melee as if it's gonna kill you. So here's a hobgoblin. I could easily have engaged him there and took him out and started flame tonguing him there. But here I'm going to increase the range by shouting and going back down and then shouting. So now I have much more range to work with. And as you can see, the hobgoblin did not even get a chance to be in melee with me. That's an encounter that is successful. We didn't take any damage. I would also like to note that it's really important that you rest between every single fight, and you make sure that your mana is full at all times. Again, you wouldn't walk around on a melee character with less than full health, so you wouldn't do the same with a mage. Excuse me. Okay, we are level 2 now, so that lets us grab Throw Flame. So Throw Flame has a much longer range. It's full screen, in fact, but it costs us a bit of hunger, and it also costs double the amount of mana. So it's sort of taking the same slot as the stone, except it's actually good. The stone is not really going to do much damage. These boots are great. They don't count as armor, so they don't encumber our spell casting ability at all, and they also give us 1 free AC. So, probably in the next video when we have a couple more chances, I'll talk about spell slot efficiency. But for the time being, all we need to know is the basic strategy of playing a mage. So again, I was a bit unlucky there. I'm just going to walk back until I have full mana, which I did, and then use Flame Tongue to finish off the goblin. I could easily have taken a hit there, but I didn't. I was lucky. Throw a puff of flame at the enemy. Again, it's not only to catch the attention of the enemy, but also to deal some damage. Flame Tongue does some hefty damage. So the ooze is now almost at full screen. This is a pretty good position for me to be in. I miscast my spell here, so I'm just going to walk back a little bit towards the known, just to let myself regenerate a little bit of mana. Kiting back early in the game is really good as a mage. It's very powerful because it just lets you regen an insane amount of your mana as a percentage, because you have not a lot of it this early in the game. Alright, so there's a Jackal. He is unfortunately faster than us, but and he also does come in packs, but he didn't see us that time, and we just walked back, waited for him to get... he didn't see us, and then we just basically shot him down. It was pretty easy. We were also, by moving backwards, separating him from the pack of goons that he probably comes with. So we were able to avoid a potentially lethal encounter. Jackals, adders, hobgoblins, these are all things that can kill the budding adventurer, especially a mage. Most melee characters will just, you know, kind of bounce off it, but not our poor mage. Alright, as for skilling, so early on in the game, early skilling, I should just put that out. Train your magic first. Then defense. Around lair. Ish. Okay. Also with, what else were we talking about? Don't get in melee with stuff. Oh yeah. So we're level 3 now, we got an attribute increase. Strength is possibly decent for certain mages that, like debuffs that have really low strength, because it'll let us wear some armor later on with less penalty. But For simplicity's sake, just always pick Int. It's just much stronger. Int will decrease spell hunger, decrease spell failure, and increase the spell power of spells, which is really powerful. It's very potent. I know that my position normally is stats are a meme. For mages, stats are absolutely not a meme. Intelligence is really important. Again, I'm just focusing on keeping stuff at bay. The second I got low on, or the second I lost any mana at all, I immediately backed off and healed. Now, here I'm going to pick up a dagger and just use it. This is our insurance ability. If we run out of mana and we have something in melee with us, we need to be able to kill it. And Bare Fist is not really a great option. Alright, there's the second Jackal, probably from the earlier pack. Smash him with a Puff of Flame. Obviously, not every encounter will go that well, but that was a really lucky shot for us. Oh yeah, so I forgot to write the tip. Tip. Oh, sorry. Early skilling, stats, pick Int every time. Maybe pick 1 or 2 points of strength later on. Again, we want the strength later on for the armor that we might wear. Alright, so we're in a pretty decent spot here against this guy, but I'm gonna just go ahead and kite back until I'm at full mana. Again, completely optimal. Probably not necessary, but it's also never gonna hurt you to always kite back, and as long as you're kiting back into the known part of the Fog of War, you should be okay. Okay, so here a Jackal, there's 2 Jackals behind him. This is not a great position for me, but I'm able to take care of them pretty handily this early in the game. I was able to create a little bit more space for me, so those 3 Jackals never actually got in melee with me, but it's very likely that had I missed, they would have gotten into melee with me, so I don't really want to say, like, oh, that was all planned. It was just lucky. Alright. So you see, again, retreating the second I need to recover mana, and I just recover it pretty quickly. Alright, with D1 done, I think I'm going to end the video here. So it looks like my previous video was a little bit rushed, considering I got to Temple in the first video. So this is a lot more detailed than I was imagining. But this is a very, very in-depth video, and I hope it's actually quite helpful for you to go through in your own time. There's a lot of information that comes with playing as a mage character, and generally I want to make this as accessible as possible to a lot of people. So even people who haven't played the game too much before, don't really understand the mechanics, people who just played melee, never played a mage, people who want to see what an optimal mage looks like all that stuff. I want everyone to be able to benefit from this, so I made it as much information as possible. I wasn't expecting a 30-minute D1 finish, but if that's the way the cookie crumbles, that's the way it crumbles, you know what I mean? I can't do anything about it. So I wanted to end the video off here with a short discussion on why play mage over melee, because I'm sure that's actually quite a question that people might ask. Sorry, I had a irrational fear just then that I stopped recording. So there's a couple of reasons why I would want to play mage over melee. First things first is there's a fun factor to it. They are more interesting to play, I would say, tactically. You have more tools offensively, and you have more than one method of killing an opponent. And learning how to use your mana, learning how to be efficient, learning how to deal with all these threats with all the tools that are in the game. It's just a fun way of playing the game, and it's perfectly viable as well. That's why it's I would say you should play mage. It also has access to AoE spells, which is something that melee doesn't have unless you're playing an axe guy, which is really cool because you get to smite like tens of enemies in a row like really quickly, and it's a lot of fun. There's a variety in spell casting, just a lot of variety. You can play all the types of mages with all the elements. You can fulfill any real D&D fantasy that you ever had. You can pursue different routes and find different combos. For example, one thing that a lot of people like to talk about is a poison spell like Mephitic Cloud or Olgreb's Toxic Radiance, which will poison everything on the screen or create poison clouds, followed by Ignite Poison, which will burn all the poison in the people's system, dealing fire damage, or in the case of Mephitic Cloud, leave fire clouds, which does a lot of damage. So that's like a cool combo, for example, that you could try to have. There are a couple more, but they're not super they're not as synergistic, obviously. For example, I think like Iron Shot and Bolt of Fire is a great combination. It's just a really powerful, solid combo of 2 attack spells, one that deals with anything that's not fire resistant, and one that deals with everything else. It's really cool. But yeah, that's what I mean by variety. So it's a little bit of interesting gameplay, I guess. And generally speaking, a lot of people want to play Mage. Not everyone wants to play melee, and I understand that. So having this tutorial hopefully will help you guys out. Why wouldn't you play Mage? This is obviously not the point of it, but I just want to point out that there are a couple of issues with mages that do crop up, and you have to be aware of that when you're starting the mage character, I guess, or starting to play a mage. The first thing is that mages are squishy, and they require a completely different mindset to melee. They are, like I said, your mana is your health, and your health is really low, so just don't worry about it. That kind of idea, and the idea of I can never get in melee with stuff, is really hard to grasp for melee only players. So it is a very hard transition. So there are times where you will feel that the game is impossible. One of the greater players that I have actually talked to, Reels, struggled very strongly with Mage for a very long time. And it was Summoner specifically, I think it was. Mage, I don't know if he had a problem with that, but Reels had a problem with Summoner because he was not aware of the fact of how the mechanic and the mindset of summoners work effectively. And that's kind of an issue that I see with a couple of new players who give up on the Deep Elf or give up on mages very early. They don't have the ability to adapt the mindset from the melee style that they've been playing for so long. And that's understandable, but at the end of the day, if you do want to get good at mage, you have to change your mindset. You can't be stubborn and be like, oh, it doesn't matter. Oh, it's just bullshit RNG if I die to this bullshit. Like my Minotaur tank would have just sat there and just taken it, laughed. No, that's not true, because your Minotaur isn't 40% minus HP, and he isn't wearing robes on like lair. It's a completely different playstyle. You gotta think about that. There's also a couple of issues with tedium. If you are playing a mage, you will eventually find out that it is tedious as fuck. Every single combat action that you do requires at least 1 to 2 key presses compared to just tab. So your hands will just be machine gunning through your keyboard like crazy. When you hear me play Mage at high speed, which I won't be doing this playthrough, you'll know. Like, I will probably play a Mage after this at high speed, just as a demonstrative series, just to show you guys a bit of how I play Mage personally. And it will be a bit tedious. You have to walk back and rest all the time. And the issue, again, there are more issues, but they're a little bit more complex than I need to explain here. And finally, of course, there's the hunger and turn count issues. Hunger is going to be a big issue for you if you're new to this. There are a lot of people that are like, oh, I need spellcasting at level 27. Oh, I need no spellcasting. It's a wide variety of people that are just like batshit crazy when it comes to training spellcasting to reduce spell hunger or not. It's just like there's too many people that just say one side or the other, when the reality is it's kind of in the middle. So yeah, the hunger is a difficult thing to balance, and sometimes you'll find yourself starving. Sometimes you'll find yourself kind of like wasting all your EXP into spellcasting. So there might be some adjustment issues. But if you follow this broad character thing like slowly, you'll start to figure out how you need to approach the entire thing in terms of like spell hunger and stuff. Anyway, that's the closing remarks for the Deep Elf Fire Elementalist tutorial part 1. I hope this has been informative for you guys. I hope this has been helpful. I've tried very hard, like I said, to put the information in, and I've tried to be as unbiased as possible, but there are bits that creep in. Again, if you would like anything to be said specifically that you think I might miss in the video, please let me know. Please let me know, because I only will take a day's break between each video being produced. So you have a very limited time to tell me anything that I need to add to the future. This is a tutorial that should be a public good, not something that I just made. It should be something that everyone should be able to benefit from. So like I said, I'm trying very hard here to be as informative and as detailed as possible. Anyway, that's enough ranting from me. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow. Oh, and as a last note, the Google Doc will be in the description.